Yeah. Monument with the Scots Graves in Edinburgh. The one where the guys on the horse on Stirling on the first. Like Thames. Mainly because they took the first one was the most costly in terms of live cash and the longest we had for a generation.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm right in the middle of this. I don't know where to go.
Thank you.
Right, mate, but what
Again, good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, the Art Historic Scotland would welcome you all to Stirling Castle. And perhaps this castle is historic. The most important, and it's certainly the grandest castle in the whole of Scotland. Now, I must ask now, has anyone here already been over to Edinburgh Castle? Going through all can see us, don't we? Everything like told you were there. Because this, without a doubt, the best castle in the country, hopefully, in the next 30 minutes or so, I can explain the some of the reasons why. Now, the earliest recorded mention of building here on this site was in 1125, which reckoned there would have been some sort of fortifications built here for probably centuries way before that. And as you're going around Castle Day, if you look at the views that this castle commands valley and beyond, And just to see how Stirling Castle dominates the surrounding countryside, then it is easy to begin to understand just why a castle such as this would be built in such a prominent strategic site. As the vantage point is so good here, from perched high upon this volcanic rock, from all sides of the castle, all the way around, miles before the enemy close to the castle. Now, the town of Stirling itself just lies below us here, is, as you know, a very central town in Scotland. And during ancient times, all the main routes of this coast area, the main from east and west, and the main routes to the north and south. But more importantly, Stirling Castle overlooked the lowest crossing point on the River Forth, the river you see flowing to the valley just below us here. So it was always said during ancient times that whoever held Stirling Castle, they would have controlled the whole of Scotland. And it's because of this that many of the greatest events in Scottish history took place in this area. And none more so than, just a mile or so from the castle on the high ground over this direction, marked by a white flagpole, maybe picked out in the distance. Now that is the site of the Battle of Bannockburn, where in 1314, Robert the Bruce defeated the English army who were led by King Edward II. Now Edward II marched his English troops from that direction to the castle to relieve an English garrison which held Stirling during the early part of the 1300s. And in fact, immediately after the Battle of Bannockburn, which of course King Robert the Bruce is victorious, when Bruce finally made his way from the battlefield and into the castle, and then got the English garrison out of here, Robert the Bruce had then all the buildings that were here at that time completely flattened. Bruce said then that never again will the English hold such an important fortress against the Scots. And that is why the earliest building we stand today inside the castle dates from around 1380. We started rebuilding here just a short time after the Battle of Bannockburn. Now, this tower, you can see the hillside way over this direction. Now, you'll all be familiar with a film called Braveheart. Yeah. Well, this is a national William Wallace monument, built in the mortal memory of the great Scottish patriot, Mel Gibson. It's not, it's the real Wallace monument. Now, the building itself is not that old, it's only about 150 years old. Over that tower, it houses Wallace's sword. And the reason
Margaret med det nya.
but it was over here in 1297,
My son's been up,
Sir
but I've
William
been
Wallace
I've
sent
never
his
been in
troops
it.
just before the Battle of Stirling, which took place in the
I've been
valley.
up school this morning.
This will listen to the castle. So, as you see, two of the most important battles during Scotland's Wars of Independence were fought well within sight of this castle here. And it is fair to say, had there been no Stirling Castle, there had been no Battle of Stirling Bridge, and more importantly, no decisive Battle of Bannockburn, such an important struggle. Now, to the castle itself. Now, not only is this castle a formidable reputation of being a fortress, but it also was for many years the chosen location of home of the Stuart kings and queens, the Scottish royal family. Between the late 1400s to the very late 1600s, it was mainly James IV, James V, Mary Queen of Scots, and very briefly her son, King James VI, all chose to spend a lot of their time here at Stirling. Now, all this part of the castle we're standing at the moment, all the way down to the gateway below us here where the flags are when you first entered. Now, all these battlements here are all relatively new. These were built during the early part of the 1700s. And the reason for that being, the British government who were in power then reckoned that followers of James Edward Stuart were gaining support. Now, these people are more commonly known as the Jacobites. And the name Jacobite just comes from Jacob for James, followers of James Edward Stuart. But during the early part of the 1700s, the Jacobites were supporters of the restoration of the Stuart crown, firstly in Scotland. And if you like, they were a sort of rebel force who fought against the then British government. So, the government of the day then had all these extra fences here built onto the castle and all the strength in it from any expected attack by the Japanese. So all this part where we're standing now, all the way down to the gateway below us, all this here is the modern extension to the castle, if you like, and there's no history at all attached to these battlements, which, as I said, are only about 300 years old.
So has this ground actually all been built up?
It has.
then?
Even the car park is, that's all been built up and levelled over centuries. There are no paint from the castle in this gateway down to the old town, which is a third of a mile away. And from that gateway, here it's really, really steep. It's a winding path away this side, not down the middle where the car park is, over to the right. So it's so steep. There was a big drop here with this gate, the drawbridge, what have you, and a steep slope. Obviously the car park wasn't there. It's all been built up and levelled over centuries. You know, it's very uneven, just castle, volcanic rock, like over in the Wallace Monument, you know, just the volcanic, the craggy tail was over in the right centre. It's like that. You know, very different to see today. Now this part, as I've said, this is a modern extension. All this is only 300 years old. Now, if I look just below us here, this gateway we can see here was built by James IV in the late 1400s, early 1500s. And this would have been the original early 18th century castle. Now the portcullis and drawbridge would have been on the archway just below us here. And if you can imagine for a second, no buildings were standing now up beyond this side. Through this entrance here would have been the only way to go. Now these two round towers we can see either side here, these were much higher than they are today, and they were cone shaped. And if you look closely, you probably notice that the stonework changes a wee bit towards the tops. Well, these towers and the gateway itself were very badly damaged during a siege here in 1651 by all the Thomas Houses. And you'll still see some marks on the tower on the right that were caused by cannon fire during the war. Now, the two round towers we can still see today, these would have been flanked by another two round towers sat just behind these ones. And you can still see the remains of one, the basic one, just over the left of the gardens here. Just like a big giant stone flower pot, and that's the base of one of the towers. So in the centre at one time, there were 4 very high round towers that were all cone-shaped. And they would have reached 3 times as the height as the ones we see today. Now, this very high square one you see in the far left here, now this is known as the Princess Tower. And it's in this part of the castle James VI as a young boy. Now, also another identical square tower, way over on the far right, but the one over this side was shortened down to make way for the artillery back. So the original outer length west of the castle, which we see here, was at one time optically symmetrical. I would have had 2 square towers on the far sides, 4 very high round towers in the centre, the portcullis and drawbridge on the surface below, and the original outer defensive walls stretched out. And bearing in mind that there were no buildings standing now or beyond this side, it must be a very impressive but I suppose quite a difficult sight to approach Stirling Castle during the 15 and 1600s to come upon this important entrance. Now, this very ornate building we see straight entrance beyond the castle walls. Now this is the Royal Palace here at Stirling, or the Royal Residences. And this was built by King James V and completed in 1542. Now, King James V of Scotland married to a French lady, Mary of Guise, and she was made Queen of Scots' mother. Now, her father was one of the most powerful men in France at that time, the Duke of Guise, and it's reckoned that by way of a wedding present, that he sent those stonemasons from France to work on his image statues we can see here. And it is one of the earliest examples of French Renaissance architecture, not only to be seen in Scotland, but anywhere in the whole of the British Isles. And you'll also notice when into Castle that all the windows in the palace at Stirling have these metal bars in place. Now, Mary Queen of Scots spent a lot of her very early childhood in this building we see before us. And during that period, the fear of kidnapping was great. So these bars we can see today were put in place as an extra protection for a very young Mary Stuart. Now, just before we take a walk down through the archway into the castle proper, I don't know if you've been aware, but for the last 3 or 4 years, the palace here has been undergoing a massive restoration programme. It has been closed during that time. Now, this came at the right time, 3 weeks ago it reopened. Now, has anyone here been to the castle before? You've never been inside the apartments when they were open? Never been inside here? But as long as anyone can remember, inside these rooms, all it was a series of very empty, very bare rooms. In fact, you call the buildings a shell. It was like that for centuries. Now it's all been restored after 3 or 4 years. And now it's all furnished and decorated. The walls and the ceilings are all painted, the tables hanging. You'll see furnished bedrooms with the Queen and the and in the costume people will take you around telling about life in the wardrobe and from illness. And we just opened 3 weeks ago, so you came just the right time to see this all. It's fantastic inside. But I will explain a little bit more about the palace itself as we go into it. What we'll do now is take a look down the archway, re-implement the castle proper, and we'll carry on from there. Just down here. Just
Can you see from here?
see the white flagpole in the distance? A mile or so away over there. Now we'll just take a walk down into the castle proper, just through the archway. This three edifice here was the gable end of James IV's Great Hall, which was built in 1503. Now also, for the last 35 years, this building here has undergone a massive restoration programme. But I'm pleased to say in this building's case, all the work now is at last. Now, you may already think, I know some of you already are, but the colour of this building is very odd compared to the rest of the castle. Well, our historians and architects were based here, who do all this restoration work, found evidence, but I should say, who told us to find evidence, that this building was in fact this golden colour when it was built 500 years ago. Now, the historians involved found detailed inventories about all the materials used in its original construction. And on that list are all the line washes and all the damage used. In fact, the master works in the late 1400s, early 1500s, named this colour King's Gold. Now it's a traditional method of plaster work, which was very popular in Scotland, and is known as hard line. And it's all finished with layer upon layer of line wash. Now all the funny plaster that you see here, it isn't pretty. It's there for a very good reason, because it also protects all the stonework underneath from licks of frost. Long way aware, we do sample quite a lot of this. I'll explain a little bit more about the hall itself as a follows. But before we do, it's a final look very quickly at the colour. I know you're thinking this one stands out today, but what you must remember, most of the castle from the series about 500 years old or so, such as the palace over here and the gateway behind us. Now these are built of sandstone, and as you're well aware, sandstone when it's new, it can be a breakable stone. So if you think for all those centuries of weather damage and smoke reaching the Dartford Castle down, at one time, in the 1500s, when all the stone was new, the whole castle would have been pretty much the colour we see here. And we also know that all these statues and columns that we see in the panels over here, these were at one time all brightly painted, purple, reds, golds and what have you. So the whole castle in the 1500s, when all the stone was new, would be a very different sight as we see today. And in fact, if you look in the doorway in the corner, just as it says private, you see the stone in the archway there has been sheltered over a number of years. The corner of the sandstone in the archway is not different as at all. Imagine the whole castle years ago, where all the stone was new, as I said, a very different sight as we see today. This wouldn't have stood out as much as it does today. It really stands out now, but it wouldn't have done then, because the whole castle, when it was new, would have been very, very bright. all those statues will break its But as I say, I want to explain a little bit more about the hall itself and its uses as we go around the tour. Now, what we have here, now this is the eastern facade of James V's Royal Palace. Now you'll notice on this side, a lot of the statues here are very badly damaged. Some of the upper ones are headless. And if you look closely at the walls on the side of the palace, especially surrounding the tops of the statues, you'll see some pock marks in the walls here. Now these pock marks were caused by musket fire during the last time this castle came under attack. And this attack took place in 1746 by Jacobite forces who were led by Boniface Charlie. Now they set their cannons and muskets up on an adjoining hill outside the castle walls over from this direction and Lacey's to this part. However, I must add that that particular attack was a very successful one at that time, and the 1740s inside the castle were a very powerful and a very military garrison. So really, Boniface Charlie and the Jacobites were mostly from the Highlands of Scotland, were no match for a well-drilled British army who were inside the castle then in their numbers, hence it being a very unsuccessful attack. But you can still see to this day, by some of the bad damage inflicted on these upper statues here, the Boniface Charlie and the Jacobites certainly left a mark, attempting to pass in Stirling of his own forefathers. Now, due to all the battle damage, and of course the weather erosion on the side of the palace, most of the statues we can see here are sadly unrecognisable. But there are two of them we do know about, tell us a bit of a story. Now we know that this figure from the far right, the lower down figure here at the bottom of the column, is a statue portraying Margaret Tudor. Now Margaret Tudor was a sister of King Henry of England, the one that lost wives, you may have heard of him. And Margaret Tudor married the very own King James IV of Scotland. That's the next figure on the left. And this was known as a marriage between the Scottish thistle and the English rose. And it was very much an arranged political marriage, an attempt to bring together the then warring countries of Scotland and England. Now this marriage took place in 1503, exactly 100 years before the union of crowns between Scotland and England. Because the year 1603 was quite an important crossroads in the history of this nation. Because also in that year, Queen Elizabeth I of England died, leaving no children as successor. So because of this marriage, it took place 100 years previous to that, linking the House of Tudor in Scotland to the House of Tudor in England. This led to a direct descendant from this marriage, James VI of Scotland, ascending to the throne of England. He became James I of England by succeeding Queen Elizabeth I. And then the crowns of Scotland and England were finally united as they are to this day, hence the United Kingdom. Now when that happened in 1603, James VI of Scotland and James I of England, the first thing they then did, they moved the royal court from Stirling Castle all the way to London, and it never recovered. So from then on, this castle ceased to be as imposing as it once was. It ceased to be a royal residence. Now after that, Stirling Castle lay empty for the best part of the following 100 years, and it has to be said, it fell into obscurity up until the late 1690s, when the military moved into it. And when the army went to the castle, they adapted many of the historic buildings purposes. For instance, James IV's Ring was first used as stables, and then it was transformed into a three-storey barracks, not into a house under the soldiers. As you can probably imagine, a lot of traditional features from medieval times would have been torn out. Now the army left the castle for good in 1964, and it was only then that the historian group was known, and they reckoned that there were still enough from the 1500s and not to restore it. And all this restoration work here in the hall, which I've already briefly mentioned, began in 1964 and was taken fully 35 years ago. And as I mentioned very, very shortly, we will be going inside to take a look at the very impressive material we have nowadays in the Great Hall. But before we have to go up the archway, Well, we'll back to the castle and we'll carry on looking at stuff like this. Now, to see today, someone's floating in the bay. I'm sure you're doing the way has been built. Now, this is by far the largest one in Scotland. And the reasons it would be built in such an imposing and grand scale, not only designed to impress anyone who ever entered here, but also to symbol of achievements, power, and of course of great wealth. Now, if we look high up in the ceiling, we'll see an oak hammer beam roof, similar to the one that was put in place here in the hall during the early 1500s. Now, wood covers have felled 400 mature oak trees locally and shaped them all to all the stones of various sizes we can see. And they're all held together, not by nails or by screws, but by over 2,500 handmade oak pegs. And if you just look, you see them left a couple a little bit longer, showing it's all put together. Taper pegs all hammered through, and they've left a couple of inches longer. In fact, if you turn this whole shop upside down, the deck in it, it's like a ship. It's like an upper compost. Many times, it would have been shipped as a built these titles, as it only built 10 years ago, using pretty much the same methods used all the century before of any trick structure, again. Now, during the 1500s and 1600s, when Stuart royalty held receptions and state occasions inside the hall, and just looking for a second to share the size of this building, you realise in those days, especially in the middle of the Scottish winter, that this must have been a very cold and drafty place. But if you look all around us here, the size of these 5 massive fireplaces around us here in the hall, and when they had huge open fires or lit ends, that must have been the way they were in those days, even during the Scottish winters, I think it was quite cold to the centuries and it's building. But when they were water ceremonies moved taking place inside the castle, over to the chapel royals such as baptisms and coronations, the kings of the celebrates events by holding feasts and banquets in this building. And a lot of these events we actually do. We know, for instance, in many of the Scots baptised his son James in Stirling, who was later called James VI. Mary Queen of Scots donated 12,000 pounds to get this level in order to all I'm sure you know, 12,000 pounds today spent on a banquet. As a piece of money, literally hundreds, possibly they don't know. And for that piece of day, all the assets, all the companies being invited, and most of the news and this very building is and so that was giving insight just how it was with that thing. And again, when the kings and queens went to Stirling, they simplified it over here as a slight raised platform. Because we need to say the king or the queen would sit on thrones and pass various laws and various judgments. And please feel free to try these swords, not the real ones, the part of restoration. Now, as we sit down there, be a king or queen for a day, just restore ones. Now, just to finish my review. Now, not only is the Great Hall Stirling used for celebrations and feasts, and also some large banquets, but it also would host some very solemn occasions. For example, for a time, the Great Hall Stirling was known as Parliament's House. And King James IV regular Scottish Parliaments inside the Great Hall, as did King James IV. And now, after 5 long years, finally, perhaps, maybe just perhaps, one day, and we're not too distant future, see the Scottish Parliament starting to sit once again in the real Come on folks, we never know. Well anyway, on that note, that's my quick phrase. We'll explain just a wee bit of this weekend. But that was, see, as I mentioned earlier, the Palace, I've been closed for 3-4 years. We opened 3 weeks ago, and you must go and see this, it's fantastic. I've been around in France working in there for the last 13 months, painting the ceilings and the walls, the temperatures in place, the rooms are all finished now. The first time we took that 500 years, so it's very good Scots, which is good. And in there, caution people, take you around and tell you life in the Royal War in the 40s, they're all in at the moment. And then just up the and up to the right. But apart from that, quite a lot of castle apart from the Palace, if you go back into the road that came from, over the right is the Chapel, Vincent the Chapel Royal. Directly opposite the Military Museum, and that's set all the right with silver, various displays to see across the well with look. And down in the courtyard, and just round to the left is the main competitions. And you must see the displays behind there. Now you're not by people visitors, and as I said, lots of this you get to explore. So thanks a lot for your time. You enjoy the rest of this. Som utbrett sig. Yeah.
Sini tahu hukum lagi. Ya. Itu mah pas makan. Kuis Senin.
Vereniging.
Ja, met je naam toch? Oh, dan moesten we dat bij hoogstijgen. Nou. Ik heb maar die muziek. Oké, wat even terug.
It's good to show grace when you take a portrait of a man clutching a weapon, I believe. You trust me. That's good to hear. Not many folks do around here anymore. But I am open to many a bribe, you see. Many bribes. How do you think so many people get within this castle? Us guards are always open to a bribe. Oh, I see. We do like coin. Do you have any golden coin? Oh, I'll leave that for now. But you look like a trusted soil, so I think I'll let it pass. You have a strange accent, though, sir. You have a strange accent. Is that because you come from afar? Where in far? Is this a state of the new world they call the Americas, is it? And how is it there?
It's very nice, all the spots up there.
Oh, really? I wondered where they were all going. I see. Maybe I should do that, really. I haven't had much luck with the weather lately. I've heard of this drink. It sounds... Is it very much like the strongest whiskey that you can brew in your own home? Right. Homebrew, good stuff. Yes, you don't like to pay people for their booze.
Is this roast roll?
Yeah, this is the mark of the guardsman, or it is very useful in a battle as well. No, very useful on horsing knights on horseback. Exactly. You would use it on the battlefield, holding it more like so, keeping your enemy at distance, or perhaps like this as well. It's said if you have a horse charging you, sometimes it's better to kneel upon the ground and hold it like so, a barrier against the horseman. Or just simply stick it into the horse and the man will soon fall. Animal cruelty isn't such a problem. Yes, I mean there's many different uses. I mean in here, the main use, lock a doorway. So let's pretend like one of these doorways and put it to the side. Halt, like so. Or if I believe there are too many people in the chamber that shouldn't be here, you level it and then you herd the cattle out of the chambers like this. If you need to use it in an offensive manner, the pointy end is best, the business end. So you hold it like so, or higher up, and you have to scare them a bit to see. The axe end is very useful. You can bring it down from high, swipe it down, or bring it up, which can be very dangerous indeed. Swiping side to side also effective, but in these chambers, not well advised. Alternatively, you do have the beak on this end, so if I was to put that behind your leg, I could easily trip you up, finish you off, or put it around the back of your neck and bring you in nice and close. Well, I could, or I could just breathe on you. I brush my teeth with you in the sea. But the best way to use this album, my favourite at the moment, I've just learned this trick from another guy. Let's pretend, just for fun, that you have been sent by Henry VIII, King of the English, and you're not welcome here. What I'll do is, I'll look you straight in the face, I'll give nothing away till the last moment, I'll kick it up, and I'll smash you in the face. So there's a few sides. It's mainly just so I can hold it easily in Paris. It's blunted end here, just so I can rest it easier, but it does provide a good crack for the nose as well. Indeed, yes. We have two captains of the guard to protect the young lady of Scots. Henry VIII wants to steal her away. So we have John Lord Erskine, who I work for, and Lord Livingston, two of the most trusted men in the kingdom. They don't have to attend Parliament because their role is here protecting the Queens. And the idea of having two captains is that no one has exclusive access protecting the Queen. So this gives it a lot less corruption and bribery in for one man to hold. You have to bribe two men, which isn't quite as attractive to you. Now my name is actually Robert Bruce. There are many in this in my name because obviously it makes you like the great king of ours of the past. So I'm obviously a great warrior too. Obviously, that's what I thought I'd say.
I never heard of him.
I have a brother of mine who's called David Bruce, the son of that famous king. So again, we do like to take the names of former people. But there's no Willie Wallace in the garden. Right at the moment anyway.
Who's the main
Possibly one of these moving tapestries. Maybe they will make one day. Who is the state? You don't have to do that, Adam. You stole it from the British.
Yes,
That's quite alright. That's quite alright. You keep that and award yourself a good Scotch pint of ale. I like this, very manly. But yes, award yourself a drink later, because that's what I tend to do as well. Yeah, we have to look at it. That's quite alright. Enjoy it with me. Hello. Have you come to see the Queen? Is this man with guidance for your father? Are you scared? You don't have to be scared. I can hear by your accent I'm good Scots folk, so I don't have to do anything. Can I get Would you like a portrait with me? Come closer then. Right? Closer still. Closer again. And can you prove that you are a strong young man? Okay. Then you Sophie, you've done. Sorry. Yeah.
the mattress would sit on top of this. This would be a 4-foot bed. The bed would be like here. What's that? No, so this is a mattress would sit on top of that. See how your bed is wooden slats and the mattress sits on top of the wooden slats? Alexander's got a steel grill which is like this. This is a bolt grill.
Gosto só que vai. Dois.
think I can take this off after a little bit.
all that's left of the Kingsdorp Garden. It was built in 1628 by Mr. Charles I. In his day, the Barclays was getting very angry at his failure. But John Damien had a plan to get back into the King's favour. And the King was interested in science, so he told them he had an experiment here at Stirling Castle. He said he would make wings and feathers, flying from the battlements of Stirling Castle to Paris. So he made his wings, he only came to Paris before the King's ambassadors were left in the battlements here. Well, John Damien didn't discover flight. He did find out a little bit about gravity though. He landed 200 feet below the base of the wall. But he was a very lucky man. He actually landed on a rubbish heap. This broke his fall, so he's alive, but they did break his leg. And it's said later when he met the King, he gave the excuse to produce chicken feathers. Though chickens are ground-dwelling birds, they don't fly too well. If these eagle feathers would have soared from the battlements to Paris. There's no record of the second attempt using eagle feathers. Now, at one time, the palace did actually stretch out into this area here. That actually fell down in the 1620s. Now, at present time, the palace actually just been restored back in 1540. Now, a few years ago, actually digging out in this area here, the archaeologists trying to find the foundations from the palace. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything out here. But about 12 years ago, actually digging inside the building up here, digging through the floor, they started to find some skeletons. Now, eventually they found 9 skeletons. There was 2 children, 1 lady, the rest were all male, aged from 18 to 45 years old. Now, one of the male skeletons had an axe blow to his head. We could tell he actually lived after that because the wound was knitting together. When we lifted that skeleton, I actually found an arrowhead embedded in his rib cage. We think he actually maybe survived that as well, maybe dying of infection from the wound later. But the studies were actually done on the skeleton. It was actually a man dating from the middle of the 14th century. He was probably a knight. The way his bones were structured, he spent a lot of time on horseback carrying heavy weapons. And also, it probably came from the very south of England or northern France. Unfortunately, we don't know that much more. And the lady looked like she'd been murdered. She actually had 2 axe blows on her head. It looked like these axe blows had been delivered or just lying down, maybe sleeping. Again, we don't know that lady more. About 30 years ago, actually working in the rafters until the top of the palace here, I actually came across a football. This football dated from the middle of the 16th century. Around at the same time, Mary Queen of Scots was in the palace here. Now, it's not at one time Mary Queen of Scots did play football inside the palace. She had a guard set up as goalpost and played football with it. That football is one of the oldest footballs in the world. In fact, it's on display down the Stirling Smith Museum. But in 2006, when the World Cup was in Germany, that football was taken across to Germany and put on display there. It's nice to know something Scottish made the World Cup final. We'll just go up into the top square now. It's not if a Scottish can laugh at it,
That's King's Park. And see if you look here, see the big white flagpole away in the distance, that's Bannockburn. That's where the Battle of Bannockburn was.
Hi. Now, come over here.
Round back.
Come over here.
I know. To look at them. That's horrendous. No, I mean, that was done years ago.
He's the old school.
Ese viaje no me importaría repetirlo. El de los casinos. Se necesita media hora de eso.
¿Este año no haciendo?
Que ver el castillo de Julia Marmenta o Julia Clara. Esto está muy lejos.
Va, que más vale que os cobre. Tenéis menos de una
No
hora.
cobra
Aquí
tiempo,
no,
vida.
aquí no es lo que dice la radio, ¿eh? Las cocinas, a ver.
Me la guardaré, Félix. Que esta no me la voy a poner ahora.
A ver.
Me pongo
Yo le he parado, porque en esto no es las cocinas.
y esta no la voy a dejar para...
Monja y todo, ¿no? They can wait for Daddy. Wait there for Daddy. Wait there. Daddy will go up with you. Mommy's So wait.
Well, that was the English book.
Oh, yes.
too far away then we can't go. Right. There's a man standing down here that could dance. Right.
It's always been quite a good time.
I can play hide and seek. I can play hide and seek.
Go on then, go on then. You go through there first.
The other one that
There's obviously something in there that will make you mad now with that.
Alright, we just walked back to the car. Oh, yeah, it's me, Brent.
What part? Should we just check that?
Alright, that's fine.
No, that's a real big drop, mate.
What?
No, you can't go there.
Why?
I don't know if you're stopping at
Why?
I don't